Mhm.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Data Dialogues, where we're going to be talking about the Data Jam and Data Jam projects. Today, I'm super lucky to be joined by Vaishnavi, who is a former Data Jam participant who has an amazing project and is going to be talking about that today. So, Vaishnavi, would you mind doing a quick introduction about yourself, your interests, your school, and how you got involved with the Data Jam?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm Vaishnavi Akella, and I'm a rising junior at San Ramon Valley High School in Danville, California. I'm a level 10 and piano honors qualified pianist at the Music Teachers Association of California Certificate of Merit, and I've been the solo pianist for the Golden State Youth Orchestra for 3 years, and I'm a pianist now for the San Francisco State Youth Orchestra. I was the winner for the United States Open Music Competition 3 times, and I'm a student of the year in ninth and 10th grade at my high school. And every weekend, I spend an hour with senior citizens in various senior living homes and rehab centers across Danville, and I love playing piano for them. And I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, as you can probably tell, she's super busy, so we're super lucky to have her talking about her Data Jam project. And when you're starting off with the Data Jam project, let's boil it down to the simplest. What is the question that you were trying to solve and investigate?
Yeah, so in my data jam project, I answered the question, is there a significant relationship between educational attainment and crime rate in the Bay Area? So that was because for high schoolers, education is a really relevant thing. We're thinking about college, next steps, and the future and everything. So education was the core idea of my project.
Awesome. And where did you start finding data to answer this question?
Yeah, I'm all about the facts. I think to have a solid opinion, it's all about having good data sources, authentic sources. So I was looking at the California and US Census Bureau. That was one of my top data sources. I also looked at the Bay Area Equity Atlas for my education data and Open Justice Crimes and Clearances, which has the crime counts and crime information and demographics about various cities' crimes across the Bay Area and California too. So yeah.
Wow, so you got a lot of good data. You're sifting through all this information about education. And what were your strategies for starting to make sense of this and analyzing it?
Yeah, so I think a really important part about analyzing data is that as analyzers, we need to know what to do. So I first started by organizing the data such that I only wanted the parts that were relevant to me. So I wanted, for example, in the crime data, only the crime count. All the other information that they provided was not relevant for me. And then after that, I was doing multiple ways of analysis, and it's important to be able to interpret the analysis correctly. And the data, I feel like, is kind of a GPS for me. Once I do my analysis, it shows me what to do next. Based on the analysis, I interpret the results, and it says, okay, this is what you do next after that. And yeah,
Wow, that's such a great way of putting it, that you kind of learn from the data as you go, and then your steps might change, but it always will point you in the right direction.
yes, that's correct.
That's great. And what were your takeaways from working on this data? Did you find any conclusions about education and crime from the project you were studying?
Yeah, so after my analysis, I did a graph of total crime and per population and median income versus educational attainment. And I found that crime and education have a statistically significant negative correlation, and income and education have a statistically significant positive correlation, which validated my hypothesis that higher education is associated with higher income, which reduces the incentive to commit crime and hence lower crime rates. And for something I learned about this project, actually by doing the data jam, I realized that, all kinds of data analyses are super important tools and it's great to use a lot of them. But as analyzers, it's super important that we know when, where, and how to appropriately analyze the data, as well as correctly interpret what the analysis indicates. Like, for example, after creating the graph of total crime per population versus educational attainment in years, as well as doing a correlation matrix comparing all of my variables for my data gem project, I wanted to do a multivariate analysis too, to further understand the relationship between all these variables. But the correlation matrix I made earlier indicated that all the variables are significantly correlated with each other. So it would not be correct to do a multivariate analysis because that form of analysis assumes that the variables are independent from each other, which in this case they weren't. So in the end, I was not able to do a multivariate analysis, but the experience was an important lesson in being able to realize where and how to appropriately analyze data and correctly interpret what it indicates.
Yeah, and that's really interesting too, because a lot of these things that you study in the real world are very closely related, and it's very complicated. It's hard to get a vacuum of two variables that are impacting each other because there's a lot of factors that might be happening in between, and then if you throw other things into the picture, it's really hard to get a clean idea of what's going on. And it's really great that you were able to kind of think about those criteria with independent variables and when to run what analysis. I think that's a great statistical insight that you had in your project right there.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to talk about is when, as a data analyst or a data jam project participant, you say you found a correlation between these two things. And what is important to remember when you're finding correlations between income and crime, and these things? What is the difference between a correlation and a causation, and what can you infer from finding these things?
Yeah. So as you said, between crime and education alone, there are just so many factors at play. It's hard to just pinpoint exactly that these two variables are related this way. So I think that it's important that when you run your analysis and you get your results, like the p-value for the relationship between the two, it's important to note that there are just so many factors at play that some analyses are not appropriate. And also that your p-value, what your analysis indicates, can't always be 100% fit for everybody, because
Mhm.
there may be certain debates that, oh, it's not, well, in my case, I found out that education is related to higher income and lower crime, but it's not always the case for every single person in the globe that higher education means higher income and lower crime rates. So it's important to note that what you found was a general description for the data that you studied. In my case, it was the data sets that I used. It's a general finding. It can be true for the general population, but there can be variances and nuances throughout.
Absolutely. And like you said with the GPS earlier, it's sometimes can be an indicator of maybe we should look more into this. We found something here. Let's dig in a little bit more closely and start another data jam project about just this one part. So I think
Yes.
there's some great insights. And throughout this project, what would you say is the most challenging thing that you had to focus on?
Okay. The source from which I got my educational attainment data offered a percentage breakdown of the educational attainment for each city. For example, for San Francisco City, it said that 11% of the people had less than a high school diploma, 12% had a high school diploma, 13% had some college only, and so forth. But as I began to perform the data analysis, I realized that education is one single variable, and each educational attainment is not separate from the others. Like, for example, you need a high school diploma to get a bachelor's degree, for example. So with that realization, I coded each educational attainment as a certain number of years instead of this percentage of the population doing that. For example, less than high school diploma, I considered as 10 years of education. High school diploma only was considered as 12 years of education, and then so forth. And this way, I was able to make it mean years of education for each city so that education was one variable. I think realizing that was a pivotal point in my research. And it was after that, that's how I overcame this challenge.
Yeah, that's really clever because if 7 people have a high school diploma and 5 people have a college diploma, you don't want to be double counting those same individuals. And that's a really great insight into the data right there.
Yeah, thank you.
What was another important lesson that you learned from working on the Data Jam project? Maybe it's not even related to data and statistics, but just going through this process, what else did you learn?
Um, I learned that data is a super valuable tool that gives you a backed up and solid opinion on various issues, phenomena going on in the world. Because people can debate anything, they can say anything about any topic, but when you have your data and you've done a solid analysis and you've correctly interpreted the results and you followed the way that the data showed you to go, then you now have a solid view on the world. And then that shows you next if it's like an issue, for example, climate change, and the data shows that this is what something is happening, then you have a solid perspective on that and you know what to do from there. So I think it's really important to, no matter what, take a factual stand on something, gather data, collect it, analyze it, and then form your conclusion based on what the data shows you.
Yeah, that sounds great. And for other people who are interested in learning more about how to get involved with learning from data, like you said, there's a lot of issues that can be solved by looking at the facts. And we can conjecture about things and talk about things, but having data can be a really reliable resource to solve a lot of problems. And for people who want to learn those skills, maybe they're about to start a new data jam project or just an independent project, how would you recommend learning and approaching this whole field in general?
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, instead of concluding something about any topic based on theory, myth, or popular belief, even, I would recommend first keeping an open mind and making your conclusion based on the data collected from authentic sources and analyzing and inspecting the data with appropriate tools. So, this is based on my experience and work in the data project where I collected data from various sources and I analyzed it in different ways. And instead of making pre-existing opinions that, oh, just because somebody told me, obviously more education is related to higher income and zero crime. Instead of that, keeping an open mind and not assuming that, for example, oh, high income cities have more education and therefore less crime or something. Just keeping an open mind and working with the data from authentic sources, because rumors could say anything, but it's the true data that shows you the real facts about what's going on. It's solid evidence.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And you can have a hypothesis, but you never really know what you'll find. And having an open mind, I think, is super important, as well as what you said about finding good data sets to work with and quality data that you're pulling from. And quick shout out to the Pittsburgh DataWorks website, where we've compiled a ton of resources and reliable data sets. Got to mention that here. But for you, Vaishnavi, do you have any follow-up research you'd want to do about this project or any other projects you're interested in investigating next?
Yes, so from my childhood, I was attracted to the piano. But lately, I realized that along with the music, it's the physics behind the piano that also is interesting me. Every weekend, I spend an hour with senior citizens in various senior living homes and rehab centers. And my data jam project inspired me to work on a live project where I would collect data on senior citizens and their behavioral patterns based on the music I perform each weekend for them. So each pitch and key in music maps to a certain wavelength in physics terms. And I'm exploring how these senior citizen people react after my piano sessions. Every weekend, I'll play pieces in a certain key, and I'm working with coordinators in each of the senior citizen living homes and rehab centers that I play at to see if they can record aspects of the residents' behaviors and moods. And I'm excited to gather the data and share my findings in a paper with my peers and at school to make them aware that collecting and analyzing data helps in various fields and topics in real time. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that is so cool. You really can apply data to every field, even something like playing the piano. And do you have a survey they fill out or anything after the piece, or is it observational data, like how people seem to be behaving after you play a specific piece?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So I pick a certain key and I play. And since it's senior living homes and rehab centers, sometimes senior citizens are maybe a little bit challenged in different ways.
Mhm.
So they have their people who are next to them and working with them, staff members. And so what they do is they record any changes in their mood, and maybe they participate more in certain activities, or maybe they don't, or maybe they just seem happier that day, or maybe they seem more thoughtful that day. So yeah.
My hypothesis would be that if you played minor keys, people would be less happy afterwards, but we'll have to see what the data says, and super excited to see what you find with that new project. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Actually, that was my hypothesis too, because for me at least, that's what I feel like. I feel like minor keys are a little bit more, they make you think more, maybe calm down more. So I'm excited to see what the data shows though.
Yeah, absolutely. And to wrap up, Vaishnavi, thank you so much for sharing about your project and your future projects, as well as some insight into the process of a data jam project. Do you have any final words of advice for anyone listening who's interested in data or the data jam?
Yeah, the data jam is an awesome way to get started. It's a great way to exercise the practice of focusing on data and keeping an open mind and exploring so many different phenomena. It's such a diverse field. It can be applied anywhere, and collecting the data shows you so many new insights, and it reveals patterns in the world that we're excited to learn about. And yeah, it's awesome. So the data jam is a great way to get started. I'm thankful to have this opportunity, and thank you for having me here, Jackson.
Yeah, thank you again. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for listening, everyone. We'll see you in the next episode of the Data Dialogues. Bye.